My name is Alex, and I've been married to Emma for 15 years. We live in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where neighbors wave as they mow their lawns and kids play in the streets until dusk. We've built a comfortable life together. Our home, a cozy two-story house with a well-kept garden, stands as a testament to our hard work and dedication. We don't have any children, a mutual decision we made early on in our relationship, preferring to focus on each other and our careers. Emma works as a nurse at the local hospital, while I run a small but successful IT consulting business from home. Our life has always seemed idyllic to the outside world, a picture-perfect marriage in a picturesque neighborhood. But beneath the surface, things haven't been as perfect as they appear. Over the past few months, I've noticed subtle changes in Emma's behavior, little things that, taken individually, might seem insignificant but together painted a troubling picture. Emma, once attentive and affectionate, had become distant and preoccupied. She spent more time on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't share, and often had excuses to be out late. Our conversations, once deep and engaging, had turned shallow and rare. Despite my growing unease, I pushed my doubts aside, convincing myself that these were just temporary phases, the result of stress at work, or the monotony of daily life. Our home, the setting of countless happy memories, had begun to feel like a stranger's house. The laughter and warmth that once filled the rooms were replaced by an unsettling silence. Even our bedroom, once a sanctuary of intimacy and connection, felt cold and distant. I tried to reach out to Emma to understand what was wrong, but she brushed off my concerns with excuses about being tired or stressed. As the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The love that had once bound us together was fraying at the edges, and I was left to wonder what had changed. Little did I know, the truth I was about to uncover would shatter the very foundation of my world. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Wednesday evening. Emma and I had always enjoyed our midweek movie nights, a tradition we started in the early days of our marriage, but lately, she'd been skipping them, citing exhaustion or last-minute shifts at the hospital. That night, she told me she'd be working late again. As I sat alone on the couch, watching a movie we'd both been excited to see, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my gut. Emma had been getting ready for work that afternoon with unusual enthusiasm. She wore makeup, styled her hair more carefully than usual, and even put on perfume. I watched her from the doorway of our bedroom, trying to convince myself that she was just making an extra effort to feel good about herself. But when she brushed past me without a second glance, the knot in my stomach tightened. "Another late shift?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, they're short-staffed again," she replied, not meeting my eyes. She grabbed her phone and hurried out the door, leaving a faint trail of her perfume in the air. The evening stretched on, and I found myself replaying the small changes in her behavior over the past few months. She'd become increasingly secretive about her phone, always keeping it close and never leaving it unattended. When it buzzed with messages, she'd smile and quickly hide the screen from my view. The late nights and unexpected shifts at work had become more frequent, and she rarely talked about her day anymore. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While Emma was in the shower, I picked up her phone from the bedside table. My hands trembled as I unlocked it, feeling a pang of guilt for invading her privacy. But my gut told me I needed to know what was going on. Her message app was full of conversations with friends and colleagues, but one name stood out: David. It was a name I hadn't heard her mention before. The messages between them were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and late-night conversations that lasted for hours. My heart pounded as I scrolled through their chat history, reading words that felt like knives slicing through my chest. They talked about meeting up, about how much they missed each other. There were pictures, too, of Emma smiling in ways I hadn't seen in a long time. I put the phone down, feeling a mix of anger and despair. My mind raced with questions. Who was David? How long had this been going on? Was she really working late, or was she with him? I tried to confront Emma about it that night, but the words stuck in my throat. She came out of the shower, oblivious to my turmoil, and kissed me on the cheek before slipping into bed. The following days were torturous. I became hyper-aware of her every move, looking for any signs that might confirm my suspicions. She continued to act distant, and I noticed more little things that didn't add up. She started dressing up more often, even on her days off. She seemed to be more attentive to her appearance, spending extra time in front of the mirror. One evening, she came home later than usual, smelling of alcohol and perfume. Her hair was disheveled, and she had a faint smile playing on her lips. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read a book, but my eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for her to walk in. "Had a good time at work?" I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm I couldn't hide. She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "It was fine, just a long day." I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but instead I nodded and returned to my book, the words blurring together as my mind raced. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning, when Emma left for work, I made a decision. I would follow her, find out where she was really going. The thought of playing detective in my own marriage made my stomach churn, but I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. I waited until she left the house, then grabbed my keys and followed her car at a safe distance. She drove across town, not towards the hospital, but to a small cafe I'd never seen before. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of the car, looking around nervously before walking inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I debated whether to go in after her. Gathering my courage, I stepped out of the car and approached the cafe. Peering through the window, I saw her sitting at a table with a man I assumed was David. They were laughing, leaning in close to each other. The sight felt like a punch to the gut, the final confirmation of my worst fears. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The reality of her betrayal was more painful than I could have imagined. The woman I had loved and trusted for so many years was sitting in that cafe, sharing a moment with another man while I stood outside, watching my world crumble. The drive back home was a blur of emotions. Anger, hurt, and confusion churned within me, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Every mile felt like an eternity, each moment an agonizing reminder of the betrayal I had witnessed. As I pulled into the driveway, I knew I couldn't confront Emma just yet. I needed more evidence, something undeniable that she couldn't brush off with another lie. Over the next few days, I became a man on a mission. I meticulously gathered information, driven by a need to uncover the full extent of her deceit. I installed a small camera in the living room, hidden among the books on the shelf, to capture any late-night phone calls or secret conversations. I went through our phone bills, noting the frequent, lengthy calls to numbers I didn't recognize. I even rummaged through her emails, finding more messages between her and David, each one a dagger to my heart. One evening, while Emma was in the shower, I took her phone again. This time I used a backup app to retrieve deleted messages. The results were devastating. There were explicit texts, photos, and even videos, each one more damning than the last. My hands shook as I read through them, the bile rising in my throat. The woman in those messages was a stranger to me, someone I didn't recognize. I saved everything to a USB drive, creating a digital dossier of her infidelity. It was the evidence I needed, the proof that would confront her with the undeniable truth. The final piece of the puzzle came one night when Emma went out, claiming she had a late shift. I followed her again, this time with a camera in hand. She drove to a hotel on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would recognize her. I waited in the parking lot, my heart pounding as the minutes ticked by. When she finally emerged, it wasn't alone. David was with her, his arm wrapped around her waist. They laughed, oblivious to the world around them, as they made their way to a room. I snapped a few photos, capturing the intimate moment, then waited for them to disappear inside before driving away. Back home, I stared at the photos, feeling a mix of rage and sorrow. There was no turning back now. I had everything I needed to confront her, to lay bare the betrayal that had shattered our marriage. The next morning I set up the camera in the living room, positioning it to capture the entire confrontation. I wanted a record of this moment, a testament to the truth. When Emma came home that evening, I was ready. I sat on the couch, the USB drive in hand, and waited for her to notice the tension in the air. She seemed oblivious at first, her smile as hollow as the lies she had been telling. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice unnervingly casual. "Sit down," I said, my tone cold and unforgiving. "We need to talk." She hesitated, sensing the gravity of the situation, then sat across from me. "What's going on, Alex?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I know about you and David. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Emma, I snapped, throwing the USB drive onto the table between us. I have everything. Your texts, your emails, even photos of you two at the hotel. Stop lying and tell me the truth. For a moment she was silent, her eyes darting between me and the USB drive. Then she folded her arms, her expression hardening. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing David. But it's not what you think. I laughed bitterly. Not what I think? Emma, I've read the messages. I've seen the pictures. You've been cheating on me for months. She shifted uncomfortably, her defensiveness giving way to desperation. It's not like that, Alex. We never… Don't, I interrupted, my voice shaking with anger. Don't insult my intelligence. You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I was lonely, and you were always so busy with work. I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood. So you turned to him? I asked, my voice rising. You couldn't talk to me? We could have worked through this together, but you chose to betray me instead. I know, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Her apologies felt empty, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our broken marriage. I stood up, unable to bear the sight of her any longer. Sorry isn't enough, Emma. You've destroyed everything we had. I want you out of this house by tomorrow. We're done. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with shock and fear. Alex, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. It's too late. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. I'll be contacting a lawyer tomorrow to start the divorce proceedings. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the couch. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, but I knew I had made the right decision. Our marriage was over, and there was no going back. The morning after our explosive confrontation, the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. I woke up early, unable to find peace and sleep, and wandered into the kitchen to make coffee. The scent of brewing coffee usually brought a sense of calm, but today, it was nothing but a hollow comfort. Emma's presence lingered like a ghost in every corner of the house. I heard her footsteps descending the stairs. My body tensed, knowing another confrontation was inevitable. She walked into the kitchen, her eyes red from a night of crying. For a moment we just stood there, the silence heavy and unbearable. Alex, she started, her voice trembling. Can we please talk? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. There's nothing left to talk about, Emma. You made your choice. But I love you, she pleaded, stepping closer. I know I messed up, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, try to fix things. Love? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You call this love? Sneaking around, lying to me, having sex with another man? How is that love? Her face crumpled, but I couldn't afford to soften now. I needed answers, not more excuses. Why, Emma? Why did you do it? Was I really that terrible of a husband? She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, Alex, you were wonderful. But you were always so busy with work, always so focused on providing for us. I felt lonely, and David, he was there for me. You could have talked to me, Emma, I said, my voice rising. You could have told me how you felt. We could have worked through it together. Instead, you betrayed me. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was weak, and I made a horrible mistake. But I still love you, Alex. I don't want to lose you. I shook my head, unable to contain my anger any longer. Love doesn't justify betrayal. You've destroyed everything we had. I want you to pack your things and leave, today. She stared at me, a mix of shock and desperation in her eyes. Where will I go? I don't have anywhere to stay. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. You can go to David for all I care. Just get out. She opened her mouth to protest, but then seemed to realize the futility of it. With a defeated nod, she turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps retreating upstairs, followed by the sound of drawers opening and closing as she packed her belongings. I sat down at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, threatening to crush me. I knew this was the right decision, but it didn't make it any less painful. A few hours later, Emma came back downstairs, her suitcase in hand. She stood by the front door, looking at me with a mixture of regret and sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted it to end like this." I didn't respond, couldn't find the words to express the depth of my hurt. She waited for a moment, hoping for some sign of forgiveness, but I remained silent. With a final, heart-wrenching look, she turned and walked out the door, closing it softly behind her. The house felt emptier than ever. I wandered through the rooms, each one filled with memories of a life that now seemed like a distant dream. I ended up in our bedroom, the place where we had shared so many intimate moments, now a cold and empty space. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. As the days passed, I tried to focus on practical matters. I contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. I also had to inform our families and friends, each conversation reopening the wound of betrayal. Most of them were shocked, unable to believe that Emma, who had always seemed so devoted, could do something so hurtful. One evening, about a week after Emma had left, I received a phone call from David. My blood boiled at the sound of his voice. "Alex, I think we need to talk," he said, his tone almost smug. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, barely able to keep my voice steady. "You've done enough damage." "Look, I know you're angry," he continued, unfazed by my hostility, "but this situation isn't just about you and Emma. It's about us too." "Us?" I spat, incredulous. "There is no us, David. You destroyed my marriage." He sighed, as if he were the one being wronged. "Emma and I, we have a connection. I think it's best if we clear the air and figure out how to move forward." "There's nothing to clear," I retorted. "You can have her. I want nothing to do with either of you." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Fine. But just so you know, Emma and I are planning to make things official. We're going to be together." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of hearing my pain. "Good luck with that," I said coldly before hanging up. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, lonely dinners, and sleepless nights. The divorce process was draining, but I pushed through, determined to regain control of my life. I threw myself into my work, hoping the distraction would numb the pain. But every time I came home, the silence of the house was a stark reminder of what I had lost. One afternoon, I received a message from Emma. It was the first time she'd reached out since leaving. "Can we talk?" it read. I stared at the screen, torn between my lingering anger and a desire for closure. After a few minutes, I responded with a simple, "Okay." We met at a nearby cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the ghosts of our past haunting us. She looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying. We sat down, the silence between us heavy and awkward. "Alex, I know I can't undo what I've done," she began, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you." "You did hurt me," I replied, my voice cold. "You broke my trust, destroyed our marriage. Sorry doesn't change that." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to understand that it wasn't just about you. I was unhappy, lonely. I felt like I was losing myself." "Then why didn't you talk to me?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "Why did you turn to him instead of trying to fix things with me?" "I tried," she whispered, barely audible. "But every time I brought it up, you were too busy or too tired. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter." Her words stung, but I knew there was some truth in them. I had been consumed by work, trying to provide for us, but in the process, I had neglected her needs. It didn't excuse her actions, but it made me see the situation in a different light. "I can't change the past, Emma," I said, my voice softer. "But I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I just need to move on." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. I wish you the best, Alex. I really do." We sat there for a few more minutes, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Then, with a final, bittersweet goodbye, we went our separate ways. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation had been painful, but it also brought a sense of closure. The chapter with Emma was over, and it was time to start writing a new one. The days turned into weeks, and while the confrontation with Emma had brought some closure, the anger inside me refused to die down. It burned like a constant flame, reminding me of the betrayal and the years of lies. I found myself obsessing over it, replaying every conversation, every moment where I had ignored the signs. The idea of revenge started to take root in my mind, a dark whisper that promised satisfaction and justice. One night, while scrolling through Emma's social media profiles, I stumbled upon David's page. He had made his relationship with Emma public, posting pictures of them together, smiling and happy. The sight made my blood boil. They had moved on so quickly, flaunting their new life without a care for the wreckage they had left behind. Fueled by rage, I began to formulate a plan. I knew that revenge wouldn't fix the hurt or bring back the years I had lost, but it might bring some sense of justice, a retribution for the pain they had caused. My first step was to gather information. I spent hours online, researching both Emma and David, finding out everything I could about their lives. David was a high-ranking executive at a marketing firm, a position that came with a certain level of public scrutiny. I created a fake online profile, using it to connect with people in David's professional circle. It wasn't long before I discovered a wealth of information about him. His work habits, his favorite hangouts, even details about his colleagues and competitors. Armed with this knowledge, I started planting seeds of doubt and rumors, small but significant pieces of misinformation that would slowly erode his reputation. Next, I turned my attention to Emma. I knew she valued her job at the hospital and the respect she had earned among her peers. I began anonymously sending tips to the hospital administration, suggesting that Emma was involved in unethical behavior. I hinted at drug use, inappropriate relationships with patients, and negligence. I knew these accusations would trigger an investigation, casting a shadow over her professional life. The final part of my plan involved exposing their affair publicly. I created a website, documenting every piece of evidence I had gathered, the texts, the emails, the photos. I linked it to anonymous emails that I sent to their friends, family, and colleagues. I wanted everyone to see the truth, to know the kind of people Emma and David really were. One morning, about a month after I had set my plan into motion, I received a call from a mutual friend, Mark. His voice was filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Alex, have you seen what's going around about Emma and David?" "Playing dumb?" I replied. "No, what do you mean?" "There's this website," he continued. "It has all these messages and pictures of them. It's all over social media. People are talking about it everywhere." I feigned surprise and told him I would check it out. After hanging up, I felt a grim satisfaction. My plan was working. Emma and David's perfect little world was starting to crumble. Over the next few days, I heard snippets of conversations from mutual friends and saw posts online discussing the scandal. Emma and David tried to do damage control, but the more they denied, the more people became interested in the sordid details. Emma was suspended from her job pending an investigation, and David's company issued a statement distancing themselves from the scandal. One evening, I received a call from Emma. I hesitated before answering, not sure what to expect. "Alex, what have you done?" she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and desperation. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied coldly. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "You set up that website. You're trying to ruin us." "Ruin you?" I laughed bitterly. "You ruined us, Emma. You and David. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." "Alex, please," she begged, her tone softening. "This is going too far. You're destroying our lives." "You destroyed mine first," I said, my voice hard. "Now you know how it feels." She was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "I never wanted it to be like this. I'm sorry for what I did, but this revenge, it's not going to make you feel better." "Maybe not," I replied, "but it's a start." I hung up, feeling a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. The revenge had brought some satisfaction, but it hadn't healed the wounds. It was a temporary balm on a deep scar. In the following weeks, the fallout from the scandal continued. Emma's suspension turned into a termination, and David faced increasing pressure at work. Their relationship, once flaunted so publicly, became strained under the weight of public scrutiny and personal guilt. One night, I received a message from David. It was a long, rambling apology, filled with regret and self-pity. He begged me to take down the website to let them move on. I read it and then deleted it without replying. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, just as I had faced the consequences of their betrayal. Revenge, I realized, was a double-edged sword. It had brought me a measure of justice, but it had also kept me tied to the pain and anger of the past. It was time to let go, to move forward, and to find a new beginning. As I took down the website and deleted the remaining evidence, I felt a sense of closure. The revenge had served its purpose, and now it was time to focus on healing and rebuilding my life. Emma and David would have to deal with the mess they had created, while I would start anew, free from the shadow of their betrayal. With the revenge behind me, I focused on moving forward. But there was still a lingering need for one final conversation with Emma. I needed closure, not just the satisfaction of revenge, but an understanding that could help me let go of the anger and truly begin to heal. One rainy afternoon, I called her and asked if she could meet me at a local park. She hesitated but agreed. The park was empty, the rain keeping people indoors. I sat on a bench under a large oak tree, watching the drops fall and listening to the distant rumble of thunder. Emma arrived a few minutes later, her face pale and drawn. She looked different, worn down by the scandal and the fallout from our marriage's collapse. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as she sat down beside me, leaving a significant gap between us. She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk after everything." "I think we need to," I replied, taking a deep breath. "There's a lot that's been left unsaid." She glanced up, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and sadness. "I know. I don't know where to start." "Why, Emma?" I asked, my voice steady. "Why did you do it?" She sighed, looking down at her hands. "I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. I guess I felt lost. You were always so busy with work, and I felt like I was just a part of the background. David. He made me feel seen, important." "I understand that," I said, surprising myself with the calmness in my voice. "But why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked through it together." "I tried," she said softly. "But every time I brought it up, you were too tired or too busy. And then it just became easier to confide in David. I know it doesn't excuse what I did. I'm so sorry, Alex." Her apology felt genuine, and for the first time, I saw the pain and guilt she carried. "I'm sorry too, Emma," I said. "I should have been more present, but that doesn't change what happened." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I regret everything. I've lost so much because of my mistakes." We sat in silence for a while, the rain pattering softly around us. Finally, I turned to her. "What are you going to do now?" She shrugged, wiping her tears. "I don't know. I lost my job and my reputation is in ruins. David and I, well, we're not together anymore. The scandal was too much for us." Hearing that didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pity. "I hope you can find a way to move forward," I said sincerely. "For what it's worth, I don't want to see you suffer. I just wanted you to understand the pain you caused." "I do," she whispered. "I understand now, and I'm truly sorry." The sincerity in her voice brought a sense of closure. The anger that had fueled my revenge began to dissipate, leaving a hollow but peaceful space. "I think it's time we both move on," I said, standing up. "I wish you the best, Emma." She stood up too, looking at me with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "Thank you, Alex. I hope you find happiness again." With a final nod, I turned and walked away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to peek through the clouds. It felt symbolic, as if the storm of our relationship had finally passed, leaving a chance for new beginnings. Back home, I reflected on our conversation. It hadn't erased the pain, but it had brought a sense of understanding and closure. Emma had made her choices, and I had made mine. Now it was time to focus on my own path, free from the shadows of betrayal and revenge. That night, I sat in the living room, looking through old photos. I saw the happy moments, the laughter and love we once shared. It was bittersweet, but it also reminded me that life moves on, that new memories can be made. I wasn't defined by Emma's betrayal. I was defined by my ability to rise above it. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate, and I was ready to embrace it. The last conversation with Emma had given me the closure I needed, and now it was time to heal and rebuild. The weeks that followed our last conversation were a whirlwind of emotions and legal proceedings. The process of divorce was grueling, but necessary. My lawyer, a sharp and empathetic woman named Marcia, guided me through every step, ensuring that my rights were protected and that I came out of this ordeal as unscathed as possible. The court date arrived on a gray, overcast morning. I dressed in my best suit, trying to project an air of calm and confidence despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. As I drove to the courthouse, I couldn't help but think about the years Emma and I had spent together, and how it had all led to this moment. The courthouse was a stark, imposing building that seemed to echo the gravity of the situation. I walked through the metal detectors and made my way to the courtroom where I met Marcia. She gave me a reassuring smile, her presence a steady anchor in the tumultuous sea of my thoughts. Emma arrived shortly after, looking pale and drawn. Her lawyer, a man who exuded an air of practiced indifference, accompanied her. We avoided eye contact, the weight of our shared history hanging heavily in the air. The trial began with the judge, a stern but fair woman, outlining the proceedings. Marcia presented our case methodically, detailing the evidence of Emma's infidelity and its impact on our marriage. She highlighted my contributions to the household, both financially and emotionally, painting a clear picture of my dedication and Emma's betrayal, Emma's lawyer countered, attempting to shift some of the blame onto me, suggesting that my workaholic tendencies had driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. It was a painful argument to hear, but Marcia quickly dismantled it, emphasizing that while no marriage is perfect, infidelity is a choice, not a necessity. As the trial progressed, witnesses were called to testify. Friends, colleagues, and even neighbors spoke about their observations of our marriage. Their testimonies were a mixed bag, some supporting Emma's narrative of loneliness, others attesting to my unwavering commitment despite the challenges. Emma took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted her version of events. She spoke about her feelings of isolation, her regret over the affair, and her desire to make amends. While her words carried a certain weight, they couldn't undo the damage she had caused. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. I talked about our early years, the love we had shared, and the gradual deterioration of our relationship. I didn't shy away from acknowledging my own faults, but I made it clear that Emma's actions had shattered the trust that formed the foundation of our marriage. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, she called a recess to deliberate. The courtroom emptied, and I found a quiet corner to collect my thoughts. Marcia joined me, her demeanor calm and reassuring. "You did well, Alex," she said. "Whatever happens, know that you've done everything you can." I nodded, grateful for her support. The wait felt interminable, but finally we were called back into the courtroom. The judge took her seat, her gaze sweeping over us before she began to speak. "Divorce is a difficult and painful process," she said, her voice measured. "It is clear that both parties have suffered greatly. However, the evidence presented has led me to a decision." She outlined the terms of the divorce, granting me a fair division of our assets and a significant portion of our joint savings. Emma was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees, given the evidence of her infidelity. The judge also awarded me the house, acknowledging that it had been my primary place of residence and source of stability. As she concluded, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The legal battle was over, and while the emotional scars would take time to heal, I could finally begin to move forward. Outside the courthouse, I stood with Marcia, the weight of the trial lifting from my shoulders. Emma walked past me, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resignation. For a moment, I considered saying something, but the words eluded me. Instead, I watched her walk away, a chapter of my life closing behind her. Marcia placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did great, Alex. Now it's time to focus on the future." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Marcia, for everything." She smiled. It's my job. But remember, the real work begins now. Healing, rebuilding, it's a journey, but you're stronger than you think. As I drove home, I reflected on her words. The divorce had been a crucible, forging a new sense of strength and resilience within me. I was free from the chains of betrayal, ready to embrace the future with a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, I stood in my living room, looking at the familiar surroundings with a fresh perspective. The house, once a symbol of a failed marriage, now felt like a sanctuary of new beginnings. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. The trial had been the final hurdle in a long and painful journey. With it behind me, I could finally start to heal, to rediscover who I was outside of the shadows of my past. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready to rebuild, to find happiness and peace on my own terms. With the trial behind me and the legalities settled, I focused on rebuilding my life. The house, once a reminder of betrayal and pain, now felt like a blank canvas where I could create new memories and forge a new path. I spent the next few weeks decluttering, getting rid of items that carried the weight of the past, and redecorating to reflect my new beginning. Each change was a small step towards reclaiming my space and my sense of self. The process was therapeutic. Painting walls, rearranging furniture, and choosing new decor gave me a sense of control and purpose. It was a way to symbolically and physically remove the remnants of a broken marriage and replace them with elements of my new life. Friends and family were supportive, offering their time and company, helping me see that I wasn't alone in this journey. One Saturday, while painting the living room, my sister Claire dropped by with lunch. We sat on the floor, eating takeout and talking about everything but the past. She had always been my rock, and her presence was a comforting reminder that I still had people who cared deeply about me. "So, what's next for you?" she asked, taking a sip of her soda. I shrugged, looking around the room. "I'm not sure. I guess I'm just trying to figure out who I am now, outside of being someone's husband." Claire smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've got a clean slate, Alex. Take your time. Try new things, meet new people. You deserve to be happy." Her words stuck with me. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I made a promise to myself to embrace this new chapter. It was time to step out of my comfort zone and explore the possibilities that lay ahead. The first step was joining a local hiking group. I had always enjoyed being outdoors, and the group offered a chance to meet new people and stay active. The first few hikes were challenging, not just physically but mentally, as I pushed myself to open up and engage with strangers. But gradually, I began to feel a sense of camaraderie and belonging. One of the regular hikers, a woman named Rachel, caught my attention. She was kind, funny, and had a way of making everyone feel welcome. We often found ourselves walking side by side, sharing stories and laughter. Her presence was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that life could be joyful again. "Why did you join the group?" she asked one day as we hiked up a steep trail. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to be honest. I went through a tough divorce. I needed something to help me move forward. Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. I went through a rough breakup myself. This group has been a lifeline for me." Her openness made me feel more at ease. We talked more about our experiences, finding comfort in shared struggles. As the weeks passed, our friendship grew, and I found myself looking forward to our hikes and conversations. Outside of hiking, I began exploring other interests. I took a photography class, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. Capturing the world through a lens was a new way of seeing things, a way to find beauty in the details I had often overlooked. Through these new activities, I started to reconnect with parts of myself that had been neglected. I rediscovered my love for cooking, experimenting with new recipes and hosting small dinners for friends. Each meal was a celebration of progress, a testament to the healing power of time and effort. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable hike, Rachel and I went out for coffee. As we sat in a cozy cafe, sipping our drinks and talking about everything under the sun, I realized how much my life had changed. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had found new passions, new friends, and a renewed sense of self-worth. "Alex, have you ever thought about dating again?" Rachel asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. I chuckled, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. I've thought about it, but it's a bit daunting. The idea of starting over is scary. Rachel smiled warmly. It is scary, but it can also be wonderful. Take your time. When you're ready, you'll know. Her words gave me comfort. I wasn't in a rush to jump into a new relationship, but the idea didn't seem as impossible as it once had. For now, I was content with the friendships I was building and the joy I was finding in my new activities. As the months passed, I continued to grow and heal. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find peace in solitude and strength in independence. I traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, capturing moments through my camera and making memories that were entirely my own. One crisp autumn morning, I stood on a mountaintop, the world stretching out before me. The air was clear and cool, the landscape vibrant with the colors of the season. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for how far I had come. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative. Looking back, I realized that Emma's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had been a catalyst for change. It had forced me to reevaluate my life, to rediscover who I was and what I wanted. It had taught me the importance of resilience, self-love, and the courage to start anew. Standing there, I made a vow to myself to keep moving forward, to embrace the uncertainty of the future with hope and optimism. Life was unpredictable, but it was also full of potential and possibility. As I descended the mountain, I felt lighter, freer. The past no longer held me captive. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to navigate it. The new life I was building was not just about recovery, it was about growth, discovery, and the endless potential for happiness. And in that moment, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be.